The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone streets leading to the royal palace. Officer Marcus Thompson adjusted his uniform and checked his watch. It was his first week patrolling this prestigious district, and he was determined to prove himself worthy of the assignment. The palace guards had made it clear that security was their top priority, especially with the recent increase in tourist crowds. As Marcus walked his beat, he noticed the usual mix of visitors taking photos and locals going about their daily business. Street vendors called out their wares, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from nearby bakeries. Everything seemed normal until he spotted something that made him pause. Near the ornate palace gates, a young girl of about 12 was sitting on the ground, her back against the stone wall. She wore simple clothes, faded jeans and a worn sweater, and her dark hair was messy as if she had been running. What caught Marcus's attention wasn't her appearance, but her behavior. She seemed to be watching the palace guards with intense focus, studying their movements and timing. Marcus had been trained to spot suspicious activity, and this definitely qualified. In recent months, there had been several security incidents involving people trying to breach the palace grounds. The girl's age didn't matter. Children had been used in various schemes before. He observed her for several minutes, noting how she seemed to know exactly when the guards would change positions. The girl pulled out a small notebook and appeared to be writing something down. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was clearly reconnaissance activity. He had to act fast before whatever plan was in motion could be executed. Without hesitation, he reached for his radio to call for backup, but then decided he could handle this situation himself. Approaching quietly from behind, Marcus kept his hand near his stun gun. The girl was so focused on her observations that she didn't notice him until he was right beside her. When she looked up, Marcus was struck by her bright green eyes and the intelligence he saw there. But he couldn't let that distract him from his duty. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus said in his most authoritative voice. "I need to see some identification and I'd like to know what you're doing here." The girl seemed startled but not afraid. "I'm just sitting here," she said calmly. "Is that against the law?" Marcus noticed she had a slight accent he couldn't quite place. "It depends on why you're sitting here and what you're writing in that notebook. You've been watching the guards for quite some time." "I like to watch people," the girl replied, closing her notebook. "It's interesting to see how they work." This answer only increased Marcus's suspicion. "I'm going to need you to stand up slowly and keep your hands where I can see them," he instructed. "You're acting suspiciously near a government building, and I have the authority to detain you for questioning." The girl sighed and started to stand up. "You really don't want to do this," she said quietly. "Are you threatening me?" Marcus asked, his hand moving to his weapon. "No, I'm trying to help you," the girl said. "You're making a mistake." Marcus had heard enough. This girl was clearly trained in some way. Her calm demeanor and cryptic responses suggested she wasn't just a curious child. He made his decision. Quickly, pulling out his stun gun and pointing it at her. "Don't move another inch," he commanded. "You're under arrest for suspicious activity and potential threat to national security." The few tourists nearby stopped to stare, some pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Marcus ignored them, focused entirely on the potential threat in front of him. The girl raised her hand slightly, and he could see a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Last chance," Marcus said. "Tell me who you are and what you're really doing here." The girl looked him directly in the eyes. "My name is Emma Catherine Morrison," she said clearly. "And you should probably call Colonel Morrison before you do anything you'll regret." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine at the mention of Colonel Morrison. Everyone in law enforcement knew that name. He was the head of the Royal Guard, one of the most respected and feared officers in the entire security apparatus. But this had to be some kind of trick. There was no way this scruffy girl sitting on the street could have any connection to such a powerful man. "Nice try," Marcus said, tightening his grip on the stun gun. "You think dropping important names will get you out of trouble? I wasn't born yesterday." Emma shrugged, still maintaining that infuriating calm. "I tried to warn you. Don't say I didn't give you a chance." The crowd of onlookers was growing larger, and Marcus could hear whispers in multiple languages as tourists realized they were witnessing what appeared to be an arrest. Someone called out asking if the girl was okay, but Marcus kept his focus on his suspect. He had trained for situations like this. Don't let emotions or doubt cloud your judgment. Turn around and put your hands behind your back, Marcus ordered. You're coming with me to the station for questioning. Emma slowly turned around, but as she did, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. Partially hidden beneath her messy hair was a small, distinctive scar on the back of her neck. It looked like it might be from surgery, and something about it seemed familiar, though he couldn't place where he might have seen it before. Just as Marcus was about to apply the handcuffs, his radio crackled to life. All units, be advised we have reports of suspicious activity near the palace gates, requesting immediate response. Marcus keyed his radio. This is Officer Thompson at the palace gates. I have the situation under control. I've apprehended a juvenile suspect who was conducting surveillance on the guard posts. There was a long pause before the dispatcher responded. Officer Thompson, please describe the suspect. Female, approximately 12 years old, dark hair, green eyes, wearing civilian clothes. She was taking notes on guard movements and claims. To be related to Colonel Morrison. The radio went silent for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could hear Emma chuckling softly, and the sound made him increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, the dispatcher's voice came back, but it sounded strained. Officer Thompson, please maintain your position and do not take any further action until backup arrives. Copy that, Marcus replied, but he was confused by the urgency in the dispatcher's voice. Should I proceed with the arrest? Negative. Repeat, do not proceed with arrest. Backup is en route. Emma turned her head slightly to look at Marcus over her shoulder. They're probably calling my dad right now, she said conversationally. He's not going to be happy about this. Your dad? Marcus scoffed. You're telling me Colonel Morrison is your father? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Why is it ridiculous? Emma asked. Because I don't look like what you think a colonel's daughter should look like. Because I'm sitting on the street instead of being driven around in a fancy car. Marcus was about to respond when he heard the sound of heavy boots approaching quickly. He looked up to see 4 royal guards jogging toward them, their faces grim. Behind them was a figure that made Marcus's blood run cold. A tall man in an impeccable military uniform with colonel's insignia gleaming on his shoulders. Colonel Morrison was exactly as Marcus had imagined, intimidating, stern, and radiating authority with every step. His gray hair was perfectly groomed, and his steel blue eyes were fixed on the scene before him with an expression that could have frozen fire. As the colonel approached, Marcus noticed something that made his stomach drop. Emma had the same green eyes, the same strong jawline, and when she smiled, which she was doing now, the resemblance was unmistakable. Emma Catherine Morrison, the colonel said in a voice that carried across the entire courtyard. What have you done now? Emma grinned and waved with her free hand, the other still positioned behind her back where Marcus had ordered it. Hi, Dad. I think your new officer here wants to arrest me for sitting on public property. The colonel's gaze shifted to Marcus, and the young officer felt as though he was being examined by a laser. Officer, Colonel Morrison said slowly, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Marcus felt his world spinning as the reality of the situation hit him like a freight train. The girl he had just threatened to arrest, the child he had pointed a weapon at, was the daughter of the most powerful security official in the country. His career flashed before his eyes, and he could already imagine the disciplinary hearing that would end his law enforcement dreams forever. Sir, I didn't know, Marcus stammered, quickly lowering his stun gun and stepping back from Emma. She was acting suspiciously, taking notes, watching the guards. I thought she might be planning something. Colonel Morrison's expression didn't change, but Marcus could see a muscle twitching in his jaw. The 4 royal guards had formed a semicircle around them, and Marcus noticed that their hands were resting on their weapons. The crowd of tourists had backed away significantly, sensing the tension in the air. Planning something, the colonel repeated slowly. And what exactly did you think my 12-year-old daughter was planning, Officer Thompson? Emma finally turned. around completely, brushing dust off her jeans. "I was doing my homework, actually," she said, holding up her notebook. "Mrs. Patterson assigned us to observe people at work and write about their routines and responsibilities. I chose the palace guards because I thought it would be interesting." Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks as he realized how badly he had misjudged the situation. "It's a school assignment?" he asked weakly. "Advanced sociology project," Emma confirmed. "I'm supposed to analyze workplace dynamics and professional behavior patterns. The guards here are really well trained, by the way. They maintain excellent situational awareness and follow protocols perfectly." One of the royal guards couldn't suppress a small smile at Emma's professional assessment. Colonel Morrison, however, remained stone-faced. "Emma, why aren't you in school?" he asked. "Teacher Development Day," she replied. "No classes today, remember? You signed the permission slip for me to visit the museum this morning." The colonel's expression softened slightly as he remembered. "And instead of going to the museum, you decided to come here?" Emma shrugged. "The museum was boring. Besides, I see you at work sometimes, but I never really get to watch the other guards do their jobs. I thought it would be more educational." Marcus cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, I want to apologize. I was following protocol for suspicious behavior, but I clearly misread the situation." Colonel Morrison finally looked directly at Marcus, and the young officer felt pinned in place like a butterfly on a board. "Officer Thompson, tell me exactly what you observed that led you to conclude my daughter was a security threat." Marcus swallowed hard. "She was sitting against the palace wall for an extended period, watching guard movements and recording information in a notebook. Given the recent security incidents, I felt it warranted investigation." "And at what point did you decide to draw your weapon on a child?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Marcus could feel sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "When she refused to comply with my requests for identification and made statements that I interpreted as potential threats." Emma raised an eyebrow. "I said you were making a mistake and that you didn't want to do this. How is that a threat?" "It sounded like you were implying consequences if I continued," Marcus explained, knowing how weak it sounded. Colonel Morrison nodded slowly. "I see. And when my daughter told you her name and suggested you contact me, you assumed she was lying?" "Yes, sir. I thought she was trying to use intimidation tactics." "So, your protocol when dealing with a potential juvenile threat is to immediately escalate to weapons rather than verify the information provided?" Marcus felt the ground opening beneath his feet. No, sir. That's not standard protocol. I should have called it in first." The colonel stepped closer, and Marcus could smell the sharp scent of his aftershave mixed with leather from his polished boots. "Officer Thompson, do you have children?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "No, sir." "Do you have younger siblings? Nieces or nephews?" "I have a younger sister, sir. She's 14. "And how would you feel if someone pointed a weapon at her? For sitting on a sidewalk and doing homework?" Marcus felt his throat constrict. The image of his sister Sarah in Emma's position made him physically sick. "I would be furious, sir." Colonel Morrison nodded. "Good. That means you understand the gravity of this situation." He paused, looking around at the crowd of tourists who were still watching from a distance. "However, I also understand that you believed you were doing your job. The question now is whether you learned from this experience or whether you're going to repeat the same mistakes in the future." Marcus stood at attention, feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The weight of Colonel Morrison's words pressed down on him, and he knew that his response in the next few moments would determine not just his career, but his character as a person. The tourists continued to watch from a distance, some recording with their phones, and Marcus realized this incident would probably end up on social media within hours. "Sir, I understand that I made serious errors in judgment," Marcus said carefully. "I let assumptions guide my actions instead of following proper verification procedures. I endangered a child based on prejudice and fear rather than facts." Emma looked surprised by his honesty, while Colonel Morrison's expression remained unreadable. The royal guards stood silently, but Marcus could sense they were evaluating his every word. "Continue," the colonel said simply. Marcus took a deep breath. I saw a young girl who didn't fit my expectations of what someone should look like in this area. When she spoke intelligently and calmly, instead of recognizing that as normal behavior, I interpreted it as suspicious. I made assumptions about her based on her appearance and age rather than actually listening to what she was telling me. "And what should you have done differently?" Colonel Morrison asked. "I should have asked for identification first before making any accusations. When she provided her name and suggested contacting you, I should have verified that information instead of dismissing it. Most importantly, I should never have drawn my weapon on a child who posed no immediate physical threat." Emma had been listening intently to this exchange. "Can I say something?" she asked. Her father nodded. "Go ahead." "Officer Thompson," Emma said, looking directly at Marcus, "you're not the first person to make assumptions about me. It happens. A lot, actually. People see a kid sitting alone and they think something must be wrong. Usually they just ask if I'm okay or if I need help. You're the first one who thought I was dangerous." Marcus felt heat rush to his face. "I'm sorry, Emma. I really am. You were just trying to do your homework, and I turned it into something frightening." "The thing is," Emma continued, "I understand why you were suspicious. There have been security problems here lately, and you're new, so you probably feel like you have to prove yourself. But Dad always says that good security isn't about being aggressive. It's about being smart and careful." Colonel Morrison looked at his daughter with obvious pride. "What else do I always say about security work?" Emma smiled. "That the best security officers are the ones who can tell the difference between a real threat and a scared tourist who took a wrong turn." One of the royal guards stepped forward. "Sir, if I may," he said to Colonel Morrison. Officer Thompson's instincts weren't entirely wrong. Miss Emma was conducting detailed surveillance of our positions and timing. In a different context, that behavior would absolutely warrant investigation. Marcus looked gratefully at the guard who had spoken up for him. "Thank you, but that doesn't excuse how I handled it." Colonel Morrison studied Marcus for a long moment. "Officer Thompson, what's your background? Where did you train?" "Police Academy in the capital, sir. Top 15% of my class. I specialized in crowd control and public safety. This is my first assignment in a high-security zone." "And why did you request this assignment?" Marcus hesitated. "Honestly, sir, I thought it would look good on my record. Working palace security seemed like a prestigious posting that would help my career." "At least you're honest," the colonel said. "Most officers give me some speech about public service and duty when they want this assignment." Emma had been flipping through her notebook during this conversation. "Officer Thompson, do you want to see what I actually wrote about the guards?" Marcus nodded, curious despite everything. Emma handed him the notebook, and he read her neat handwriting. "The palace. Guards maintain excellent posture and alertness even during quiet periods. They communicate with subtle hand signals and eye contact to coordinate their movements. Guard A checks the east entrance every 12 minutes, while Guard B focuses on crowd monitoring. Their uniforms are perfectly maintained, showing professional pride. Question for interview. How do they stay focused during long shifts with no incidents?" Marcus looked up from the notebook, feeling even worse about his assumptions. "This is really good observation work. You notice things I didn't even catch." "I've been around security people my whole life," Emma explained. "Dad taught me to pay attention to details and patterns. It's like a puzzle. You watch how all the pieces fit together." Colonel Morrison took the notebook and glanced at his daughter's work. "Emma, this is excellent analysis. Mrs. Patterson will be impressed. However, next time you want to observe palace security operations, you need to inform me first." "Why?" Emma asked. "It's a public space." "Because situations like this one happen when people don't have context," her father replied. "Officer Thompson saw a young person conducting surveillance without knowing who you were or why you were there. A simple phone call could have prevented this entire incident." Marcus realized the colonel was teaching both of them a lesson. "You're right, sir. If I had known who she was—" "No," Colonel Morrison interrupted sharply. "That's exactly the wrong lesson to take from this." Marcus looked confused. "Sir, the problem wasn't that you didn't know who Emma was. The problem was that you treated her as a threat instead of as a person. Every child deserves to be treated with respect and care, regardless of who their parents are. You shouldn't need why to know that someone is a colonel's daughter to avoid pointing weapons at them. The colonel's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been so focused on the embarrassment of not recognizing Emma's identity that he had missed the deeper issue entirely. The crowd of tourists was beginning to disperse, but Marcus could see some of them still filming, and he knew this moment would follow him for a long time. "You're absolutely right, sir," Marcus said quietly. "I should have treated any child with the same care and respect, regardless of their background. The badge doesn't give me the right to terrorize people." Emma looked between Marcus and her father, sensing the weight of the conversation. "Dad, he seems like he really understands what went wrong, and honestly, I probably should have introduced myself properly instead of being mysterious about it." Colonel Morrison raised an eyebrow at his daughter. "You were being mysterious?" "Maybe a little," Emma admitted with a small grin. "When he asked what I was doing, I could have just said homework for school right away. But he seemed so serious and official that I wanted to see how he would handle the situation." "Emma Catherine Morrison," her father said sternly, "are you telling me you deliberately tested this officer?" Emma's grin faded as she realized she might be in trouble. "Not exactly tested, more like observed his professional response to an unusual situation." One of the royal guards made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Colonel Morrison shot him a look that could have melted steel, and the guard immediately returned to stone-faced attention. "Officer Thompson," the Colonel said, turning back to Marcus. "It appears you weren't the only one making mistakes today." Marcus found himself in the unexpected position of defending the girl who had caused him so much trouble. "Sir, Emma was just being a curious kid. She didn't do anything wrong." "Didn't she?" Colonel Morrison asked. "Emma, what's the first rule? I taught you about interacting with security personnel." Emma's shoulders slumped slightly. "Always be clear about who you are and what you're doing." "And did you follow that rule today?" "No, sir." "Why not?" Emma was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could see her thinking carefully about her answer. "Because I wanted to see if he would be fair to someone he didn't know was important. A lot of people treat me differently when they find out you're my dad. I wanted to see what kind of person he really was." The honesty of her answer surprised Marcus. This 12-year-old had been conducting her own test of his character, and he had failed spectacularly, but there was something else in what she said that bothered him. "Emma," Marcus said gently, "you shouldn't have to test whether adults will treat you fairly. Every kid deserves respect and kindness, no matter who their parents are." Colonel Morrison looked at Marcus with what might have been approval. "Exactly right, Officer Thompson. Emma, your little experiment put both yourself and Officer Thompson in a difficult position. You have responsibilities too." "I know, Dad. I'm sorry." Emma looked genuinely contrite. "I didn't think about how scary it would be for Officer Thompson to think he might have made a huge mistake." Marcus was struck by her empathy. "Actually, Emma, I was more scared about having threatened an innocent child than I was about career consequences. Though I was pretty worried about that too," he added honestly. The tension in the group seemed to ease slightly. Colonel Morrison looked around at the remaining tourists who were still watching from a distance. "I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," he said. "Officer Thompson, would you join Emma and me for lunch? I think we all have more to learn from this situation." Marcus was stunned by the invitation. "Sir, are you sure? I mean, after what happened." "Especially because of what happened," the colonel replied. "Emma's right that this was a learning experience for everyone involved. The question is whether we're going to let it make us better or just leave it as a mistake." Emma brightened considerably. "Can we go to that cafe near the museum? They have really good sandwiches, and I still need to finish my sociology project." "What else do you need to do for the project?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. "I have to interview someone about their work experience and write about the challenges they face in their job," Emma explained. "I was going to interview Dad, but maybe you'd be willing to talk to me instead." This morning was definitely a challenge in your job. Marcus looked at Colonel Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. I'd be honored to help with your project, Emma. Though I'm not sure I'm the best example of how to handle challenges. Actually, you might be perfect, Emma said thoughtfully. You made a mistake, you recognized it, you apologized, and now you're trying to learn from it. That's exactly the kind of professional growth story Mrs. Patterson wants us to write about. As they began walking toward the cafe, Colonel Morrison fell into step beside Marcus. Officer Thompson, can I ask you something personal? Of course, sir. What made you become a police officer? Marcus thought about the question as they walked. I wanted to help people, sir. To make communities safer and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. I know that sounds idealistic, but it's true. It doesn't sound idealistic at all, the colonel replied. It sounds exactly like what we need more of in security work. The question is whether you still believe in that mission after this morning. Marcus looked ahead at Emma, who was pointing out architectural details of the buildings they passed, clearly excited to be sharing her day with new people. More than ever, sir. I think I just needed to remember who I'm supposed to be protecting. 3 months later, Marcus walked his beat with a different perspective. The same cobblestone streets led to the same palace gates, but everything felt changed. He had learned to see the area through new eyes, not just as a security zone to be protected, but as a community space where real people lived their lives. The cafe where he had lunch with Colonel Morrison and Emma had become a regular stop during his rounds. The owner, Mrs. Chen, always greeted him warmly and often shared information about unusual activity in the neighborhood. She had become one of his most valuable community contacts, helping him understand the difference between genuinely suspicious behavior and the normal quirks of local residents. Marcus checked his watch and smiled. It was almost 3 o'clock, which meant Emma would be getting out of school soon. Over the past few months, she had become an unofficial consultant on his approach to community policing. Her sociology project had earned her the highest grade in the class, and she had presented it at the school's science fair, where it won first place in the social sciences category. As he approached the palace gates, Marcus noticed a familiar figure sitting against the wall with a notebook. But this time, instead of alarm, he felt warmth and amusement. "Good afternoon, Emma," he called out as he approached. "Working on another school project?" Emma looked up and grinned. "Hi, Officer Thompson. Actually, I'm helping you today. I noticed something interesting about the tourist patterns near the east entrance, and I thought you should know about it." Marcus sat down beside her, something that would have been unthinkable 3 months ago. "What did you observe?" "There's a group of teenagers who've been coming by every day at the same time for the past week," Emma explained, showing him her notes. "They're not taking pictures or acting like normal tourists. They seem more interested in the delivery schedule for the palace kitchen." Marcus looked at her observations, impressed by the detail and clarity of her notes. "Have you told your father about this?" "I wanted to tell you first," Emma said. "You're the community officer for this area, and Dad always says information should go through proper channels." Marcus felt a surge of pride at her confidence in him. "Thank you, Emma. This is exactly the kind of community intelligence that helps keep everyone safe. Should we go talk to your dad together?" "Actually, he's in meetings all afternoon," Emma said. "But I know where to find Sergeant Williams from the Royal Guard. He's usually at the east entrance around this time." As they walked toward the east entrance, Marcus reflected on how much his relationship with the palace security team had changed. Initially, he had expected them to treat him as an outsider after the incident with Emma. Instead, Colonel Morrison had recommended him for specialized community policing training, and the Royal Guards had begun including him in their daily briefings. They found Sergeant Williams exactly where Emma had predicted, and Marcus presented her observations about the suspicious teenagers. The sergeant took the information seriously, asking detailed questions about timing and behavior patterns. "This is good intel," Sergeant Williams said. "We've noticed some gaps in our delivery security lately. I'll have the team pay special attention to that area." As they walked back toward the main gates, Emma pulled out another notebook, a different one from her observation journal. "I have something else to show you," she said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I've been working on a project and I wanted to get your opinion." She handed him the notebook, and Marcus saw that it was filled with detailed sketches and notes about community policing strategies. Emma had been observing not just the palace security, but his own interactions with residents, tourists, and local business owners. "Emma, this is incredible work," Marcus said, flipping through pages of analysis about effective communication techniques and conflict resolution. "Some of these insights could be used to train other officers." "Really? I was thinking about it. As a possible career someday. Not necessarily police work, but maybe something in community safety or public administration." Marcus looked at this remarkable young girl who had changed his entire approach to his job. "I think you'd be brilliant at anything you choose to do. You have a gift for seeing situations clearly and helping people understand each other." Emma beamed at the compliment. "Dad says the same thing. He told me that good security work is really just good people work, understanding what people need and helping them feel safe." As they reached the main palace entrance, Colonel Morrison emerged from the building, clearly finished with his meetings for the day. When he saw Marcus and Emma together reviewing her notebooks, he smiled with obvious satisfaction. "Officer Thompson, I see my daughter has recruited you as a research partner again," the colonel said, approaching them. "She's teaching me more about community policing than any textbook ever could," Marcus replied honestly. "Her observations today might have identified a potential security concern." Colonel Morrison listened as Marcus explained Emma's findings about the suspicious teenagers. When he finished, the colonel nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, both of you. Emma, you're developing into quite the analyst. And Officer Thompson, I'm impressed by how you've embraced community-based security. The mayor's office has noticed the positive changes in this district." Marcus felt a flush of pride, but more importantly, he felt the satisfaction of knowing he was finally doing the job he had always wanted to do, protecting people by being part of their community rather than standing apart from it. As the afternoon sun cast golden light across the palace grounds, the three of them stood together, a veteran colonel, an enthusiastic young student, and a police officer who had learned that sometimes the best training comes from admitting your mistakes and being willing to grow. Emma closed her notebooks and shouldered her school backpack. "Same time tomorrow, Officer Thompson? I want to show you my analysis of the morning shift patterns." Marcus laughed. "Wouldn't miss it, Emma. But maybe this time we could start with introductions if any new officers are around." Colonel Morrison chuckled. "Good thinking. Though I have to say, that incident 3 months ago turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened to this security district." As they parted ways, Marcus realized that the colonel was right. What had started as his worst professional mistake had become the foundation for his best work. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the moments when everything goes wrong, as long as you're willing to listen and learn from the people around you, even when those people happen to be 12 years old.